Hello, and welcome to the Wikigender Webinar for this week. This week's theme is on combating online violence against women and girls. So this ends the week-long online discussion that we've been having on the Wikigender platform. I'm Annalise Thim. I'm with the OEC Development Center, which manages Wikigender, an online platform for gender experts and advocates. And we are very excited to have with us today some experts in the field of online violence and ICTs. We're going to start out with introducing each of the experts. I'm going to pass it over to Sara from the Womanity Foundation, and she's going to explain why we're all here together, what brings us together today, and then who each of the experts are.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the collaboration. It's already the second week that we're having this campaign, and it's a fantastic opportunity to gather great experts around the topic. A bit about Womanity Foundation. Womanity Foundation is based in Switzerland and works to empower women and girls to shape their future and accelerate progress within their communities worldwide. The foundation initiates, supports, grows, replicates programs which promote structural change for women and girls in innovative and effective ways. So as one of Womanity's global programs, we've got the Womanity Award. It's the world's first major award that supports collaboration of organizations that prevent violence against women. So the award is a partnership between the Womanity Foundation, who provides financial and technical assistance, and there is an innovation partner, an organization that's created an innovative campaign or curriculum or community development program, and then there's a scale-up partner that will replicate this innovative program in a new settings with all the adaptation challenges that it entails. So altogether, we mobilize resources, knowledge, and networks to increase the impact of effective and innovative solutions to prevent violence against women. So the second edition of the award was given to the Association for Progressive Communications. We'll have Sara with us on the call, and they will replicate their Take Back the Take campaign in Mexico in a collaboration with Luchadoras, which is a collective of feminist media producers, and La Sandía Digital. This collaborative campaign, which addresses the widespread problem of online violence against women, will enable women to proactively respond to online abuse, claim virtual space, and creatively influence policies and practices. And the ultimate goal, of course, is to build an internet free of violence. We're thrilled to support this campaign replication for 3 years. Also grateful to work with a network of organizations that harness ICT to prevent violence against women. And of course, we've got Dalia, Othman from Tactical Tech as well with us, who is part of this network as well. This network is called ICT for Womanity. And if you want to know more about the network and want to participate, please go on the womanity.org website to connect, and we'll be happy to start a conversation. That's it for me.
Great, thank you. So I'm going to provide a little bit of background about sort of the general problem and what we're going to be speaking about today. So while it's somewhat of a new phenomenon, online violence has emerged as a global issue and something that has been becoming more and more talked about within the media. So a 2015 report showed that almost 3/4 of women online have been victims of some sort of cyber violence. In the European Union, this is 1 in 10 women report experiencing cyber violence. Young women are particularly affected by this. Women in the age range of 18 to 24 are the most likely to experience this online violence. And while media attention has been increasing, legal and policy work has not been keeping up with the issue. So 1 in 5 internet users lives in a country where harassment and the abuse of women and men online is extremely unlikely to be punished, whether this means that the law is lacking or it's just not implemented. So we're very excited to be joined by 3 experts today who are at the forefront of this fight to combat online violence against women and girls. So we're going to go around the table and give them each a chance to talk. We have a few questions that we'd like to ask. And we're going to start. So we'll start with Sara Baker from Take Back the Tech, Lulú Barrera from Luchadoras TV, and Dalia Othman from Tactical Technology Collective. So let's get started with the first question, and Sara, will go to you first. So how is your organization working to promote legislation and policy on this issue? And do you have any concrete examples of the work that you've done, and then also legislation and policy that's been put in place? Thank you.
Sure. Rights Program, APC.
Sarah, we're having a little trouble. You seem to be cutting in and out.
A camera?
Yeah, let's try it without the camera, maybe.
Is that better?
Yes, it seems to work.
So I work for the Association for Progressive Communications and APC, and last year, of which Take Back the Tech is a part, released the results of online violence against women. And we found that this problem of online violence against women is really situated within a culture of impunity. So a structural and systemic failure of justice systems to address abuses. We looked at 7 countries, and this was the
Sarah, we're having some trouble hearing you. So why don't we go to Lulu, and then we'll come back and see if we can get a better connection with you.
Okay.
Hello. Well, I present myself first to begin with. I'm Lulú Barrera from Luchadoras, and we are a cyber feminist and media activist collective based in Mexico City. And we counter online violence by countering stereotypes against women online, by doing storytelling and reverting the traditional image of women that we have, that have populated media, and also it's replicating in some digital spaces, by turning into empowering narratives about social change. And that's how we got engaged with being concerned about the digital space, because we realized that the digital space was replicating some of the trends of violence against women offline. So now we're working together with APC and other partners around the world to make a feminist internet. And well, responding to your question, this has been actually, I think, has been in my mind these days now that I am at the Internet Governance Forum. One of the discussions we've had on the judiciary aspect of the question and the access to justice in the forum has been also, how do we think about, how do we place women's best interest in the center of answering this question of policy and legislation? And we begin by asking, what does it mean to restore justice in case of online violence for women? Because most of them, and as Sara was just saying, live in context in which impunity in the justice system is prevails, it's pervasive, and sometimes when they go to file complaints, not even about violence online, violence in the streets and the houses in everyday basis, they face a huge challenge. They are re-victimized by the authorities, and processes are long and not effective at all. So there are another wide set of possibilities to restore the sense of justice that women may have or may want to have, that not necessarily imply at the forefront legislation or access to justice. So this doesn't mean necessarily that we shouldn't look for cyber crimes, let's say, to be legislated, but we can also look to another wider range of policies that can be more effective, because this change has to go in parallel with the change of structural justice systems that are failing in countries like Mexico, for example, in India. Japlin from Feminism in India with Freedom House just launched a really interesting research on online violence, and she was also saying the same. Even though India has, from a couple of years ago, an IT Act that considers cyber crimes, which is a big step in legislation, if you can call it like that, this is not actually meaning access to justice for women. So I would like us to invite us think also out of the box in terms of policy and legislation, and think about other considerations on alternative mechanisms. And also, one of the people commenting around this topic in the IGF was also saying we may opt for administrative processes that are in a way quicker and cost much less to the state, and could be also most effective. But I think this is an ongoing discussion, and I'll leave it there from my side now.
Great, thank you. Sarah, do you want to try again?
Sure. Can you hear me? I'm trying to, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. Yes,
Yes?
it seems to be working.
Okay. Sounds okay? Okay, well, I'm not sure how much of what you heard before, but I was talking about APC's research in 7 countries, and that we found a culture of impunity around online violence against women. But we also found that each of these countries has laws that can be used for cases of online violence against women. These include laws that address gender equality, that define and penalize violence against women, that penalize specific online violence against women offenses, and penalize ICT offenses, and laws that allow for damages. So in Colombia, Mexico, and the Philippines, these countries expressly recognize psychological violence in their laws, which makes them especially useful for cases like this. And then some specific examples related to online violence against women. In 2009, the Philippines actually enacted a law that prohibits the taking, publishing, and distributing of images without consent. And this is the Anti-Photo and Video Voyeurism Act. And then in Bosnia, there are civil remedies that allow for damages for slander. We also found that cases from all 7 countries showed that there were these existing laws that could be invoked, but authorities just really hadn't considered them. And part of that is just due to a lack of understanding online violence against women as real violence, and understanding it as the continuum of part of the continuum of online violence against women. So as part of our research results, we included some recommendations for states. And some of these are that they should recognize violence against women as a human rights violation that includes psychological violence, that should be explicit, that psychological violence part, as well as the online, offline components of that. That they should provide adequate training on using these laws to address online violence against women, and that they should focus on redress rather than criminalization. But another thing we find that would help is if states address the digital divide and ensure that more women have safe access to the internet, that more women are contributing to the development of ICTs and are taking on decision-making roles in internet governance. Because all of these actions can really go a long way towards transforming gender norms that enable online violence against women. And governments have a duty to create an enabling environment for women's access to and enjoyment of ICTs.
Great, thank you. Dalia, would you like to comment?
Yes, of course. So let me start by saying a little bit about Tactical Tech and the project I work on. So Tactical Tech is a nonprofit that's based in Berlin, and we work on exploring the political and social role of technology in our lives. And I work specifically on the Gender and Tech project at Tactical Tech. And we work directly with women rights defenders and women activists across the global south on a number of different things, but mostly on building up their skills, their tech skills, so that they can actually combat and fight back against online harassment and tech-based violence. We have a number of we do research on this issue, and a number of curricula and manuals that we issue on this. While we don't necessarily do specifically work on policy issues and work with lawyers, we do work with activists who do that sort of work. And I think one of the major conversations that we've had with activists and women's rights organizations is that beyond the law, there's always this conversation of definitions around online harassment and tech-based violence. And there seems to be different frameworks and different definitions across the world. So in the US, we have a set of definitions. In the global South, we have different sort of tactics and harassment that's used that also lack definition. So I think one thing we would like to push in having conversations with activists is to create a common set of frameworks and definitions that we could advocate from a policy perspective. And we noticed that while there are laws, as Sarah talked about, there are laws that exist that do protect women. A lot of them tend to be sort of laws ingrained in sort of older forms of communication that don't translate into the online world. And so that's something that we would like to push for with our activists, like working with activists. And part of that is working with authorities and trying to establish better understanding of what the online world means when you have activists going to file complaints with police and the police have no idea what to do. And I think for us, it's building the knowledge and the skills and the know-how amongst the activists so that they could actually fight back and work on these different issues.
Great, thank you. Well, let's move on to the next question, which is on what we need to scale up local initiatives. So we just talked about what's happening at national level, at the international level, but we know that there also are some very great initiatives taking place at the local level. So if you all could, if you know any of these and could talk about some of those, and then also what is needed, how can we scale these up to have more of an impact, either nationally or internationally? And then initiatives, both response and prevention. So Sarah, hopefully it'll work. We'll start with you again.
Okay. I think for scale-up projects, one thing that's critical is connecting local projects to a broader network. In terms of Take Back the Tech, each local campaign must be able to address online violence in their own context. So that means a campaign in Kenya may have different priorities and solutions than a campaign like the one Lulú is working on in Mexico. While all countries, of course, face this similar problem, each country has its own trends around online violence against women. So for example, in Pakistan, blasphemy accusations leading to death threats and sometimes physical violence are a major problem. Whereas in Bosnia, there's a trend of men creating fake Facebook profiles of their estranged wives when they're going through divorce. These pages they're basically advertising for sex with these women and even going so far as to post their phone numbers. And then, of course, strategies and solutions will depend on social and legal options that are available in each country as well. So what we aim to do at APC is assist local campaigns in identifying priorities and developing actions around those concerns, as well as connecting them to the Take Back the Tech network, which is global. Then they can learn from each other and strengthen each other's campaigns, even if they're addressing different issues within the phenomenon of online violence against women. They're still ultimately doing the same work for their communities. And there's a lot that they can identify with and find common ground on. And it's critical for campaigners to connect with women in other communities. A network allows them to share knowledge and information, to share skills and strategies. So that has a lot to do with building capacity and solidarity. So overall, I would say that scaling up projects is about recognizing that this is a global problem that aims to deny women our human rights and keep us from having both individual and collective power, while at the same time prioritizing local needs and enabling projects to be effective in local contexts. You have to have that balance. The more we're able to connect local knowledge and capacity, the more we strengthen collective knowledge and capacity. And if we focus on solidarity without compromising one group's needs for another's, we're stronger and louder together. I think that we can really amplify each other's voices. And this is very much what Scaling Up is about. And then we create a powerful global movement that's effective both on the ground and in these digital spaces. And this really, in fact, is one of the great benefits of the internet, that all of these feminist collectives and individual activists can come together in an unprecedented way.
Great, thank you. Lulú?
Yes, also adding a little bit to the previous questions, I just would like to address also this concern I've been having in my mind during these days at the IGF, and I'm sorry I'm just speaking about the IGF so much, but I'm just embedding this dynamic this week. And I think that we are failing in recognizing when we speak about online violence against women, recognizing it as a human rights issue, especially from an interdependent, in the principle of interdependence that is like a basic one regarding human rights. Because I've seen how when we speak about access, we don't always speak about violence or the context of the country in which women live. For example, in the context of Mexico, which is a state of surveillance, and many countries in Latin America are one of the main consumers or clients of hacking team, for example. You have to, when you speak about access and online violence and also the structural, contextual, and political scene where women are living, you have to take into consideration all those parts, because access is not only having access to technology, but also challenging the social norms and the political landscape that may also prevent you from accessing meaningfully to technology, and to also feel that you have the capacity to shape and create, and being not only a user but a producer, a creator of the web. So that was just in my mind. And regarding the scalability of projects, I also agree with Sara regarding the South-South connections, and not necessarily South-South, but grassroots connections globally, because that has allowed us as luchadoras to find how, at what extent, for example, what we are experiencing in terms of online violence against women in Mexico is also happening in other countries, in other latitudes, in other geographies, and how this also can speak to us about a global trend. And when we see that the digital spaces where this violence is happening, and we see that those spaces, for example, are social networks, which are global and are corporations, then you can know, regarding also linking these questions to the policy making one, you can have a better sense on how to address and build evidence to push forward for change, or to have better mechanisms for example, for reporting or responding to these types of violence. So I think those type of changes are really important. And I don't know if I would like to speak about international scalability rather than replication in different geographies with a deep sense of ownership. And that's what we are trying to do in Mexico with the Take Back the Tech campaign. We are a network of 6 collectives, grassroots. What we are doing is what we are discussing, what does it mean to take back the tech for us? And we are trying to create a collective identity, our own symbols, our own name. And this has been a process. This is also a process, like Sara was saying, for movement building, not necessarily global, but also like local and from down to the top. And yeah, that speaks more truly about our context, our needs, and can also have, from my point of view, a long-lasting perspective, because it's really developed or co-created by people like on the ground, and has much more possibilities to respond to the context that Yeah, that's happening, because also like to finish with this thought that in Mexico we also have how to say it, like power relations within our own territory. Everything is very centralized. Everything happens in Mexico City, and I think those power relations within the national context also have to be contested and changed. And also we can build networks of solidarity that challenge those relations within our own territories. For example, delocalizing everything from Mexico City and going to communities and establishing also grassroots networks. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So just for those who don't know, who are watching this, the IGF is the Internet Governance Forum, and it's great that you're there, and please feel free to share more about what's happening there. It was taking place in Mexico, if I'm correct, and I think it ended today, or it's ending today. So please feel free to share more. It's really great that we have this insider information from you there. So thanks for sharing. Dalia, let's go on to you.
Of course. Yeah, I'm slightly jealous that Lulu's actually attending the IGF. I've been getting different reports and following Twitter and sort of the internet on what's going on there. There's an amazing, I think, feminist women activists that are present there this year, and I think it's fantastic. And I think this feeds into the whole question of communities and networks of support, which I think is, adding to what Sara and Lulu said, I agree with them fully on what they said. And I think networks of support is the key thing, building communities and connections, not just locally within the country, but within the region and within the global south, is key to get get the different movements to grow and expand beyond their local the local situation. And so for us as a Tactical Tech, that's precisely what we're trying to do through the Gender and Tech Institutes. We have these week-long institutes or training camps of sorts where we bring in women activists to meet, to receive training on various issues like digital security and privacy, to have conversations around of data in our society today. Holistic security is another key topic and it's an opportunity. They have the opportunity to engage with each other, to conduct skill shares, to learn from each other on the different and local issues that these women, these activists actually face within their local context. And beyond the Gender and Tech Institute, so they come in for this week, they gain the knowledge, they receive the skills, and then they go back to their communities and they conduct these follow-up activities, whether it's hackathons, whether it's other digital trainings, whether it's Wikipedia edit-a-thons, and we keep them connected through various lists so that in the future, in 2 years, 3 years down the line, they could still engage with each other. They can still have this sort of knowledge exchange. So we actually had a Gender and Tech Institute. The first one was in 2014, and we actually did it in right outside of Berlin. And that was of a more global institute. We brought in women from all over the world to come together and engage. And then we wanted to focus on more local and regional institutes and activists, because what Lulu said about the sense of ownership and this localization, I think is very key. So we actually conducted another Gender and Tech Institute this year in Latin America. It happened in June in Ecuador, where we brought in 50 women activists and rights defenders together to actually receive that training. And I think someone from Luchadoras was present at the GTI. And we're doing another one next year in Asia. So we're trying to build a number of regional we're conducting these regional GTIs, very localized, very focused on the region, where women can come together, exchange their experiences, gain skills and knowledge, and then go back to their communities to help sort of scale up
the different campaigns and issues that they're focusing on?
I think there's a duty of care as well from a funder perspective that we need to play. All these local and regional initiatives need to be forwarded and communicated to other parts of the community, the people who maybe sponsor or fund these programs. There's a lot available online, general initiatives, and our duty through the ICT for Humanity Network, for instance, is to showcase these local and regional initiatives. So again, sharing that to an audience that might not be abreast of all these initiatives. I think it's very important to communicate to wider networks who might not know these local differences. So our role is about that.
Thank you. Those are really interesting interventions. We're going to go ahead and move on to the third question. So last week, we actually had another webinar last Friday on engaging men and boys and what does it mean to bring men and boys into the conversation on to really get down to sort of the root causes of when we're talking about violence against women. So I'd like to ask each of you in turn, what can be done, what is being done to engage men and boys, but also other actors. So whether that's police, we talked about different social services at some point, but how are we reaching these other actors to make sure that this isn't just happening in a vacuum, this conversation, but that we really are making it a holistic approach. So Sarah, we'll get started with you.
Well, the Take Back the Tech campaign does this by encouraging women and girls to create content that challenges gender norms, challenges ideas like women don't belong in public spaces like the internet or technology is masculine, because these ideas fuel violence against women. They're trying to silence us, they're trying to drive us offline. But we also encourage content that reflects women's lived realities when it comes to violence and other rights violations, because it's critical that women are really shaping the narrative around gender-based violence, that survivors get to tell their own stories in their own words, and that those who are most vulnerable, like trans women and queer women, women of color, women from the global south, women living with disabilities, that they are seeing their voices amplified and their stories are being told. As part of the 16 Days campaign actually going on right now, APC just launched our new digital storytelling site. You can find it at stories.apc.org. And digital storytelling is really a powerful method of raising awareness because, for one thing, the storyteller is in control of all aspects of the story. And you can read more about our very feminist methodology at the website, but they have control of the whole story, from the words to the music to the visuals, rather than having their story mediated by someone else, by a producer, editor, or authority who is very outside of their own lived experience. But really, any kind of digital content will do, and it's critical that women are creators of content, not just consumers. And I know Lulú will probably talk more about this, but that we're creating culture and defining online spaces ourselves. We've seen effective memes, infographics, comics, blog posts. In fact, I think in our 2014 campaign, we created an infographic that was a report card grading social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube on how they approach women's rights and deal with online violence against women. And that actually got picked up in about 100 media outlets around the world. And because of that media attention, those platforms suddenly responded. They were concerned about how it looked for them because they were all getting failing grades. But we're also seeing more feminist collectives pop up in various countries, and these collectives are young and innovative and fun. I think addressing violence against women used to be, this very serious and depressing thing, and it doesn't have to be that way. So a lot of young feminists are coming up with creative ways to get people's attention and inspire them to take action. But it's also important that we have conversations about violence, that we're creating content, but we're also having conversations. And people talk about hashtag campaigns as being lazy, but so I was just in Mexico with Lulu at the IGF, but right now I'm in the US. And in the US, you probably saw the hashtag #YesAllWomen. And it was far from lazy. Women who were participating in that were often sharing their experiences of violence in public for the first time. It was scary and it was intimidating, but it was very powerful for women to be sharing these experiences. And there have been hashtags like Mi Primer Acoso, my first harassment. There was a hashtag in Turkish that meant tell your story. And these hashtags have actually been really effective in increasing men's understanding of just how much violence women live with on a regular basis and how it affects our lives on a daily basis. Bystander intervention is on the rise, and there have been some great bystander intervention workshops from Heart Mob lately, particularly after the US election. And people are starting to see that they have a responsibility to use their privilege to stop abuse. And I think as part of that, it's also important to address how men are harmed by the norms that enable violence against women, how deeply harmful ideas of masculinity are for men too, and have conversations around that. So content that challenges those norms, conversations that challenge those norms, I think can go a long way towards freeing us all from their constraints and making a huge difference in violence against women.
Thank you. That was really motivating. Lulu, you want to speak?
Sure, and this is just like more evidence on how strongly Take Back the Tech resonates with the work that Luchadoras is doing, because everything in my mind was about the storytelling, and also the story about my first harassment hashtag. So I'm going to try not to repeat what Sara just said, but a very common question I get all the time, really all the time, it's about, this comment, there's also women who are misogynist, so when it's not just men. So I really hate this question. What I always say is that it's not the battle of sexes, it's not men against women or anything like that. We are contesting a system of thought, that is embodied in all people. I mean, not only men and women, but all dissident bodies and identities. So it's not an issue of just involving men or women. It goes way beyond that, because that's one of the scapegoats that you get more frequently as feminists, when people say also women have a macho way of thinking, and they raise kids with this thought. But of course they do, because it's a system of thinking, it's a system of thought, un sistema de pensamiento, how we call it in Spanish. So that's when I agree deeply with what Sara was just saying. And I would like to quote here an example from Argentina, el colectivo de varones antipatriarcales. It's like a collective of anti-patriarchal men got together and started questioning how patriarchy is actually also affecting, as Sara was saying, their own lives and their own emotions and their own human rights. And when they see that the gender fight is also a fight that is relevant for them, that I mean, sets another note. There are also some other collectives in Mexico working with men that they get together among men, and they think about their lives, and I think that about how these structures are impacting to them. And that also recalls me to the previous award winner for the Humanity Prize in Lebanon, because they also have some work around that. And that's something I wanted to say, but also I agree with the power of storytelling. And I would just like to expand a little bit more about my first harassment hashtag, because after the hashtag was released and became really viral, like more than 30,000 tweets in a single night, the day before the biggest protest in around gender violence in Mexico in our history, which happened last April 14 in this year, many things changed. And this is a really interesting story on how online and offline worlds are really deeply connected, not only in the way we experience violence, but also in the way we can contest that violence and make change happen. So after the protest, which was gigantic and had major impact in the media and also changing the conversation with the government, who afterwards start some policy making around the topic, we, as Luchadoras, did a dialogue with feminists and women, an open dialogue in our city, in Mexico City. And there's this girl came and said that after the hashtag, or with the hashtag, she found out that the same, oh, I forgot the word in English, sorry. The same member of their family abused her and her sister, and they found out only after the hashtag was released, and they both saw they shared the same story. So they decided to go together and go to the family and speak finally after years, after 10 or more years, about what happened. So this is also an example on how online action can change cultural norms in the face-to-face level, the materialized world, you know. So I would like to say, yes, to speak up around something that we've been always told as women we should shut up. It's really powerful, and doing it together with a wider community also allows safer spaces to disclose and change.
Thank you very much. Just for background information, you mentioned one of the previous winners of the Womanity Award, and that was Abad, who's based in Lebanon. And if you want to learn more about that, because we spoke about this last week in a previous webinar, we had Anthony Keedy join us, and he spoke very well about this subject and about how they're working to address negative masculinities. So you can find that on Wikigender if you want any more information about that. So Dalia?
Yeah, sure. It's always hard to follow Sarah and Lulu in the sense that they always say sort of a lot of the things that I agree with and we're sort of working on. We do focus more on sort of the skills of women activists and women rights defenders, but I think to us, there are a number of key issues that we try to focus on in terms of building skills and tactics and finding the right tactics to deal with tech-based violence and defending women's sort of freedom rights and freedom of expression. And to us, I think it's one of the key issues is, of course, raising visibilities of various issues from and raising visibility towards the women's presence online as well are key issues. Like I mentioned Wikipedia editathons in earlier, and I think that is one of the key issues that we push, which is trying to edit pages on key women figures that exist within society and highlighting their roles within society. Another thing, and I think that's one issue or tactic that I think is quite helpful in dealing with online harassment is counter speech. So the hashtags are very powerful campaigns or trends that actually push for visibility. But I think when women are harassed, there's one thing where the community can also support is actually doing some forms of Twitter swarming or counter speech online. So the community backs the people who are being harassed and actually talk back to whoever the harassers are. And I think that there are, of course, different tactics used in different situations. And these are things that we do sort of have these conversations when we do have our institutes. We have these conversations around them. We look at the different tactics that have been used. We gather that information and try to build curriculums and manuals around that so that in the future institutes, women can actually make use of that information and potentially use these tactics. It goes from dealing with trolls, counter speech, developing safe spaces. So I think two issues to me are two key issues that we work on is trying to build the visibility where activists do develop content. And the other thing is developing tactics around counter speech online.
Great, thank you. So I want to pose one last question, and we can each go around and give our sort of final thoughts and concluding remarks on this really interesting discussion. So we talked a lot about what is taking place, what is happening, but I want to know sort of what are your feelings about what comes next? Where is this movement headed? What direction is it headed in? What direction do you think it should go in? And then what else does it need to really gain momentum and to gain energy to see an even greater impact than what is already happening? And within this, do you think that there is a possibility to engage with sort of the large social media platforms, so Facebook and Twitter, for example? Sarah, you touched on this briefly, but sort of how do we bring those actors also into the conversation as we move forward and continue working in this fight? So Sarah, we'll start with you.
I think we're at an interesting point right now, because I think we've come a long way in raising the issue of online violence against women and in getting people to understand it as a problem. I mean, policymakers talk about it now, the media is all over it now. We still have a long way to go in terms of what policies are being set and how the media talks about it, but we've seen huge changes in just the past couple of years. At the same time, like I said, I'm talking to you from the United States. And this election has made online harassment a little worse. And I think it is promising to get worse, especially with some of the people that Trump is choosing for his main advisors and in his cabinet have been involved in some of the work that we're trying to fight. So the climate, I think, is getting a little more aggressive. But the good thing about that is, like I said, bystander intervention is still on the rise. More people are willing to step up and ready to step up and do something about it and learn about it and use their privilege in a positive way. So I think that we really need solidarity right now. We need to work together more than ever to stem this tide. And I think that we can do that. And in fact, one of the things that's giving me great hope is seeing all these feminist collectives that I was talking about. And so I think that what we need to do is really invest in young women and girls and making sure that they know how to use ICT tools and that they know how to deal with digital security and that they know how to use their voices. And we're promoting that and amplifying that. I think that's probably the best thing that we can do right now. And that's what gives me a lot of hope moving forward. In terms of these social media companies, of course, over the past couple of years, we have seen a lot of positive changes with them. We've also seen some negative changes. You know, sometimes they move forward and then they go back a little bit. But what we have seen is that they are more responsive than they used to be. But I think as much as we push them to change things, we need to consider if there are other spaces that we can use. I mean, so much activism is happening on Facebook now, and yet Facebook is part of the problem. So we need to have conversations about our use of Facebook and what that means politically and whether or not there are alternatives and if we could be creating alternatives.
Thank you. Lulú?
Yes, I would like to say that, yeah, we have had some conversations with Twitter and Facebook, and I have to say that I recognize that both recognize that it's a problem, but necessarily are investing equally in different topics. For example, I get the sense that issues around suicide and child pornography, which are crucial and have to be attended, yes, absolutely, with no doubt, they have provoked much more commitment from platforms than combating online harassment. And that's something that really worries me. And that I say is also a reflection of how patriarchy works in the offline world, because we tend to normalize gender violence or violence against women in general terms, and that's happening also in the digital space by some social platforms. With Twitter, we have had a good experience speaking on how reporting mechanisms have improved, and we've seen change happening in that aspect, and we are really happy with that experience. And that experience for me is an example of what social platforms need to do, which is working and speaking closely with people on the ground. So for example, we have had, when we organize women on the grassroots, we face violence. The immediate thing we start doing is organizing ourselves in order to protect ourselves or defend ourselves. So for example, someone is trolled, we tend to go or our community to report it massively. And we, for example, had an advice from Twitter that not necessarily is the best way to put the troll down, no? So as they are developing some reporting mechanisms, we need to be in close dialogue so we can use better those mechanisms. Otherwise, we as groups in terrain, let's say, we will need to figure out which is the best way to get a report listened by the social media platform. When they know the way and they can help us know how to use better the reporting mechanisms to make this happen quickly. And that has happened with Twitter. We still need to improve a lot the conversation with Facebook, because in Mexico, for example, a lot of feminist collectives that are new and are getting stronger and stronger have a strong community online in Facebook. And once they are out of Facebook, it's because of censorship of their content, because this also happens very strongly, they lose connection with the communities. So that also stresses another thing, but that for Luchadoras is really important. We need to build communities not only based on online connections, but also in face-to-face and grassroots connections. And that way, this complementary relation gets just the movement much more stronger. So for me, that's also a way forward. And another thing I would like to say, I think we are in a position of demanding response for social platforms, because sometimes, without having this political or politicization of the digital space and the power relations in the digital space, we perceive that those services are free and we don't feel entitled to ask or demand for change. But the actual thing is that they are using our information and data also for profit, and they need to consider us as a group that is contributing to their business and take it seriously, you know. And we need also to feel entitled to demand accountability to those spaces and not perceive these services as free, because they are actually profiting from our data, because our data is being mined through that platforms, and they need to take responsibility of responding to us in a much wider way. And also, we need to think how to build new spaces out of these big corporations to organize among ourselves and speak among ourselves, because I think it will arrive a breakpoint in which we will need to look and fight for an internet which is not necessarily privatized in all of its entities.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Dalia, do you want to finish?
Yeah, to add again to what Sara and Lulu said, I think the fact that platforms recognize that this is a problem is I think the first step forward, and the fact that media is recognizing this and reporting about that. But again, it goes back to the whole issue of definitions and laws. When Facebook takes down content, when they take down pictures of women breastfeeding, but they don't take down things related to violence, I think there's a problem there. And I think the first step that as women activists and who use these platforms, the first thing is that, yes, hold them accountable, but hold them accountable to certain and specific definitions that they use related to both hate speech and online harassment. I mean, when we talk about online harassment, it's a vast issue. It starts from calling someone a woman names and spans to doxing and cyber stalking, and it could be something related. It could be domestic, or it could be a state act. So I think recognizing these different nuances when it comes to online harassment is key for a lot of those, for both laws and policymakers, but also for the social platforms to actually go through. And right now, I don't see that happening, neither on Twitter's end, or Facebook's end. And I think we need to have clearer definitions of that as a starting point. And then we could look at the technology and what they're doing, whether the reporting, the blocking, the takedown is really enough when it comes to harassment as well. I think these are the issues. And to move on to safe spaces, I think this is something that we definitely promote, and it's a conversation that needs to happen. It's key to have safe spaces for women activists to engage without feeling threatened or harassed. But we need to figure out whether alternative spaces is the right way to go, or whether we can create safe spaces within these structures that exist today. I don't necessarily have the answer to that, but I think this is a conversation that we need to have, because if we're on Facebook, or a lot of the women are on Facebook, and that's how they reach women or the general population. I mean, take the Middle East, for example. So many people use Facebook as a tool to communicate, to network, to organize. If we create safe spaces, alternative safe spaces, how do women activists get in touch with the general population, with other people? So it's a question of how do we figure, where's the balance and alternative and spaces and private companies and the private internet that we're talking about. And I think for us, these are the conversations that we engage with in those institutes. And that, again, to go back to this, what happens next, we're definitely pushing for further. We're going to do more institutes in the future and try to go through these different nuances and discuss the definitions and frameworks around online harassment, combating online harassment, and the whole question of safe spaces. So that to us, it's a continuation of what we're trying to do and building those networks of support, which I think is really key within activists across the world.
Great, thank you. So that concludes all of the questions that we have for today, and we're coming to the end of our time, just in time. So I want to thank you all again for joining us today. Sara Baker from the Association for Progressive Communications, Lulú Barrera from Luchadoras, and Dalia Othman from Tactical Technology Collective. We are very grateful for your expertise and for participating. Sara, also from the Womanity Foundation, we've had a great 2-week campaign. So this is the end of our campaign, but I hope that the conversation does not end here. You can join us on Wikigender. It is still going on. The online discussion is still going on. You can also find out more about these different activities that are taking place. And this is a thought-provoking discussion. So let's keep it going online and keep reclaiming that space. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.